I call it in Grenada the fraternity of the rum. All right, the fraternity of the rum.
The Brotherhood.
And, yeah, and people, rum friends are closer than church friends.
All right, good evening again, and thank you for joining us for this special conversation in recognition of Men's Mental Health Month. Tonight's panel, Navigating Male Adulthood in the 21st Century, brings together a distinguished group of Caribbean professionals to explore the unique pressures, experiences, and cultural realities shaping men's lives across the region. We hope this conversation sparks reflection, healing, and hope for everyone tuned in. I'm your moderator, Desarie Nicholas, and on behalf of CariCope Wellness, we're honored to host this space for dialogue. So joining us tonight is Dr. Carlisle Goddard. He is a distinguished consultant physician with over 20 years of expertise in diabetes, endocrinology, and internal medicine. He currently serves as medical director at the Endocrine Center Incorporated and Sky Care Hospital in Barbados, a graduate of the University of the West Indies and King's College London. Dr. Goddard holds prestigious fellowships from the American College of Endocrinology and the Royal College of Physicians. His career spans key clinical and academic roles, including consultant physician at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital and lecturer at the University of the West Indies. He has played a pivotal role in shaping regional diabetes care, co-authoring the PAHO-endorsed protocol, Managing Diabetes in Primary Care in the Caribbean. Dr. Goddard is also a passionate public health advocate and respected speaker, frequently appearing on health media and global platforms, including Lions Club International, where he serves as council chair for multiple District 60. He published research on diabetes, distress, and chronic disease in Afro-Caribbean populations. It underscores his commitment to equity and evidence-based care. Known for his inspiring leadership, compassionate care, and community-driven initiatives, Dr. Goddard exemplifies excellence in clinical practice and health promotion across the Caribbean. Dr. Goddard, thank you so much for joining us. And please say hello to our audience and tell us what made you say yes tonight.
Thank you very much, Desarie. Good evening to wider Barbados and the wider Caribbean. My fellow panelists, good evening. I was pressured by Terry, actually. Terry called me and said, I have this burning topic. We want someone to present, and I was wondering who can present. Carlisle, fine, let me call him. So Terry said present, said, okay, no problem. But no, the topic itself is very inspiring. And it's at a critical time in our history where men are being marginalized or seem to be marginalized, and men are no more or are not as prominent as they used to be in the landscape of things. So that has a lot of psychological impact. And I think being fair, being frank, being honest, we need to address it. We need to at least distill it in an open session so men can hear their own feelings being verbalized and know that they're not alone to start. And when you're not alone, then you can feel solid, you can find your confidence in a group and then start to speak out and then empower what you actually represent. So I think this is a good platform in which we can have that discussion. Thank you.
You made some excellent points so far that I am really looking forward to getting into, especially in regards to men not being as prominent in society and how that impacts the way they see themselves and their value, right? So thank you so much for being here. And I now introduce Claude J. Douglas. He is a lecturer in sociology at the T.A. Marichaud Community College in Grenada. He is also a former instructor in political science at the St. George's University, a former part-time lecturer at the University of the West Indies, Grenada, and former visiting tutor at the Royal Grenada Police Force Training School. He is author of 7 books, 2 book chapters, and 2 professional articles. Douglas has been conducting life skills and personal development training for the past 30 years. Mr. Douglas, thank you so much for joining us, and tell us what made you say yes.
Well, Terry was very persuasive, But besides that, I think that this subject for discussion for this evening, is a very critical one, and because it underscores a lot of the problems, that plague our society in these days, So I feel that I can make a contribution, from a sociological perspective, in terms of explaining, factors, for example, that may affect, the whole mental health and functioning, of our young men in particular in the Caribbean white society.
Thank you so much, Mr. Douglas, and I really look forward to hearing more from your perspective, especially from the sociological perspective, because we belong to similar fields. So I think your insight will be very interesting to hear. I now introduce Mr. Leon Cherry. Leon Cherry is a St. Lucian mental health service provider and a graduate of the University of West Indies St. Augustine campus with a Bachelor's of Science in Psychology. During his undergraduate studies, he served on the International Affairs Committee, a subcommittee of UWI's student government, and on the Student Senate, where he collaborated in coordinating student enrichment activities. He was also the St. Lucian Student Association of Trinidad and Tobago's vice president before becoming president, where he largely focused on being an ally to St. Lucian students in addressing their quality of life concerns. In recent years, Leon's professional life has been dedicated to counseling children, teenagers, and young adults. He works as an assistant psychologist at Genis Insight Counseling Service. Leon, forgive me if I'm chopping up the name. And he is also a member of the British Psychology Society. Leon also serves as co-chair, along with myself, for the Caribbean Regional Coalition for the Decriminalization of Suicide. His goal is to improve access to quality education and affordable mental health services in St. Lucia. In the pursuit of his graduate degree, he seeks to create access to affordable psychological and psychoeducational assessments and psychotherapeutic interventions to St. Lucian youth. So Leon, thank you so much for joining us tonight. And please tell everyone what made you say yes.
What made me say yes is that I mostly work with young men. Most of my work has been with young people and young men in particular. And I feel like my experience with them and learning their problems and what they've been facing in their life, I think I would be in a unique position to offer my perspective on what they're struggling with, but also offer up some solutions that could help them with what they're facing in their lives. And so I felt compelled to be here, and also because I am a part of CariCope, and I think it would be wrong of me not to be part of the discussion. But I look forward to sharing my insights, and I'm open to learning from the audience as well.
You've been an excellent partner on our team for the last few years, especially being on a team filled with women. I think you've brought in a very important perspective from us, and you've played a really integral role in helping us try to reach out to men, because we know that in today's world, the suicide rates for men is higher than women, right? And so it means that we have to make sure that we're doing a lot of outreach to men, making sure that they know that there is help out there for them. And so to begin, one of our grounding questions for tonight, for each of you panelists, is this one. So in your respective fields, medicine, mental health, and sociology, what patterns or pressure have you observed that uniquely affect Caribbean men as they navigate adulthood? And how can we create more supportive systems or responses that are tailored to their realities?
Well, it's a very interesting question, and I know my own biases are here, so I'm very careful how I answer. I am of the opinion that the current generation Caribbean man lacks the parentage and the social community background, to use a Bayesian word, brought up, see our upbringing that in my generation would have had. And I say that in the sense of, I'm not marginalizing any career or anything, but in my day, let's take for instance a boy's haircut. A boy's haircut was done at the side road barber or in a little back shop where men are sitting down and verso and having the haircut. And it was all males. You hear the bantering, you hear the jabbing of men at one another, where it's a protected space. You could say almost anything you want, no one would get insulted, they'll just laugh it off. And that was the culture of the side shop, side street, under the coconut tree, under the mango tree haircut era. In today's world, the barbershop is not that anymore. It's a cultural institution where both men and women are getting their hair cut. The conversation is different. A video may be on or TV may be on. There's not much bantering or poking of fun. You also find it's a salon now where you get your hair washed the same place and air blow or air dry. That is so different from the raw testosterone masculinization of my day. And I say that to say, I felt the barbershop of my time was a place where a boy became a man. He saw how men interact. He saw raw testosterone bantering. He saw people being able to jab and still being able to respect another point of view without getting up in arms and want to beat at someone or slap someone. Or sometimes the jokes got so serious, it was a fierce exchange, but then it died off. There was some other change of topic or something. Now people leave angered and want to come back to hurt one another, or they go away crying, or they feel pressured and bullied, to use such terms in this setting. I felt the barbershop of my day aired those type of topics, and men shared a wide experience that helped the youngsters to bridge the gap. That is not done today. So the societal teaching, this community upbringing, the Ubuntu, the facility of the neighborhood looking after one another, is no longer there. So that parental structure you get is from your own household. And today's households are broken. It's either a single mother looking after a child, there's no extended family, the grandparents or anything like that to assist. So you can't get that extended support. So take, for example, a mother. She may be a hairdresser with her little child. She has no one to look after that child, so that child has to go to the hairdresser with her. So now at midnight, you're still in the salon, plaiting somebody here, braiding somebody's hair. Your child wants to sleep, it's tired, it's going to be antsy. But what can you as a mother do? You have to make a living, but you can't look after that child too. So the child coming out in today's world doesn't have the parental care and the community guidance that we got from the generation of the 60s and 70s. And I think that alone is pivotal to the new generation. And unless we can find a way of bridging that gap or having protected space where men can be men, girls can be girls, and then integrate the two, we have people exposed to so many hormonal changes and raw emotional input that they don't know how to navigate it. And that is causing severe confusion in our youngsters. So I can talk all this, and let me pause and let me hear some other perspectives and see if we can go.
Wow. Really, really insightful. And I'm hearing a lot of things that I agree with because it's something I drastically notice is different. The village is gone. That is how I put it. The village is gone. The community aspect of how we were raised or how our parents were raised is gone. And I think that impacts the kind of mentoring that men in our society are giving. Mr. Douglas, your response.
But I'm in full agreement with Carlisle, in terms of the major shift that has taken place in the socialization of men in the Caribbean, and he spoke, as a reference point about the barbershop, the informal barbershop on the tree where men felt free, to discuss and to communicate feelings and all of those things. Right. This does not exist anymore. We have a situation now where there's a lot of social pressure on men. And it has a lot to do with some of the social changes that would have taken place in our society. New perspectives have been developed of how we actually socialize. There are men, for example, in Grenada, who wouldn't take a ride on a motorbike, because of the homophobic, attitudes, and that they actually have. There are men basically whose conversation basically would not be as it used to be before, very open, one in which men can share their feelings and so forth. In doing that now, men basically will err on the side of femininity, if they were to express some of those feelings and display certain types of behaviors and what have you. All right. So the society has undergone major shifts, that will affect men. Because remember, the whole issue of gender socialization, we are still grappling with this, and I should say misgender socialization, because we have never gotten it right, in terms of the socialization of Caribbean males and what have you. All right, a number of historical, sociological factors would have influenced this, So I'll stop short here because I know that I have a lot to say more on this, especially socialization, the whole issue of the feminization of the teaching profession. All right, in some primary schools, 99% of the teachers are females. So there is a lack of male role models in school, basically. When I went to primary school, the majority, of our teachers were actually males. So you had sufficient male role modeling taking place in the school. Today, that is actually almost absent, So, and the whole issue of uh, women advancement within the society, and there's nothing wrong with that, because I always tell people I'm a feminist, so definitely what is happening that would have led some women to actually emasculate certain men, for falling behind, for not as what I should say, pursuing in terms of their careers and all of those things. So it's really, I should say, a mountain of pressure, that a lot of men have been faced with today. And the sad part of it is that there is this lack, of community. Okay, lack of community based on the growth of individualism. Today, there's a lack of this community consciousness, and collectivity with regard to the support. When I was growing up, in Grenada in the 1970s, in the village, and hence the reason that was the basis for my first book that I did, which I titled "When the Village Was an Extended Family in Grenada." All right. So there was much help. All right. So if a parent or parents, basically a home, was deficient in providing adequate socialization for the young male, the older men in the community actually chimed in that regard. So I will leave that there for a while.
Very, very interesting perspectives, especially on the way that our society has changed in regards to different professions, right? So it sounds like you're saying, while women have stepped up in a lot of areas professionally, it seems like men are being erased. And I think for me, I have a lot of questions about why that is, and I'm sure that we'll get into that. But I think it's a very, very interesting thing to see the shift. And I guess the question I have around this is, how do we get towards balance? Because I think that's a thing that's really lacking these days when it comes to the different roles that we have in society. So Leon, you've heard a lot. I'm wondering if you have anything different or even similar to share.
Okay, well, I think I would share some of the perspectives, especially when it comes to the men's society and not having the spaces that existed in the past where they could be themselves. But I think more than that, what I've noticed is that a lot of the young men that I've interacted with, whether in my work or in, professional life or private life, is that a lot of them lack that male figure, that role model in their life. And I think what you see happening is that they kind of move through life feeling lost because they don't really know how to navigate the world as a man because they didn't have someone to teach them, how to find, the solutions that they need for their problems, to kind of model good behavior for them. And I think that's especially important now because I feel like they had a shift in that the old rules that existed was that, you work hard, you have a good head on your shoulders, you can achieve something, you can get ahead in life. But a lot of the young men and men my age as well feel as though like the goalposts kind of shifted in the last few years and that being educated, being hardworking is not enough to get you by in life, and that there's a greater requirement on you, in order for you to succeed. And I think that has left a lot of young men feeling disillusioned with society, because you feel like, okay, I'm doing what I need to do to get ahead in life, and things aren't working for me. I'm not getting ahead. And so, I just kind of check out because I'm following the rules and the rules not working for me. So I noticed that a lot. And I feel like the solution to that problem has to be, a reemergence of community in Caribbean society, where we can kind of bridge the gap, between younger men and the older men, and where we can learn from each other about the problems that are going on. And I say learn from each other because I feel like we have some things that we can teach the older generation, and that there's certain changes that has taken place in society and some of the rules has changed, and to kind of understand where we're coming from and where we can, move forward. Because I feel even though things have changed, I feel like some of the fundamentals about being a man and succeeding in life, I think these still remain true. And I feel like some of the young boys could benefit from having someone present who can teach them that and help them move forward in their lives. So that's my perspective.
Thank you, Leon. So something that I heard very common in everything that each panelist has said so far is that the role models just either aren't there, or a lot of people are just not present anymore to provide that mentorship. The village isn't there. I'm hearing a lot of that. And something that Leon said that I found that was very interesting was that working hard is not enough anymore for men to be considered successful or to be seen as valuable. And I think that's a very interesting perspective. I'd like to really take us into some of the core questions that focus on culture, identity, and also personal growth. And Leon, I wanted to start with you for this one, just because you and I have had a lot of conversations around what it is to be a young person who is trying to settle down in life, trying to find a partner and things like that, right? And so this first question goes this way. So in our societies, traditional masculinity, it often emphasizes emotional toughness and independence, right, for men. How do you see these norms influencing the way Caribbean men approach relationships?
I feel like for some of us, we feel a need to be stoic and to not show weakness. So that's one part of it. And so what you find is if we experience in problems, or if there's something, maybe there's a breakdown in communication or something not going well in our life, we have the tendency to kind of withdraw and not really say what is going on, because we're not in the place where we feel comfortable with expressing, what is going on with us. So I feel like you can have a lot of that going on, where something going wrong and then the man might shut down, in a relationship, maybe with his family or in romantic relationships. But I think more than that, what you find is that they find it difficult to express themselves, even when there's a situation where it may be okay for them to speak. And I think what a lot of men find is that sometimes when you do open up, when you're not as tough, I think we kind of feel like there's like a almost expiration date on how much you can be vulnerable or how much you can show weakness, before it gets to a point where it's like repulsive, because I have had conversations with women in the mental health space, and then they have admitted that it's not really attractive, to see a man who is a crybaby or who is, saying too much, somebody who is complaining too much. And so it's like, we feel like at some point, if I complain, if I say too much, if I show weakness too much, at some point it will be too repulsive. So it's easier to just, shy away from saying anything at all, rather than to kind of go into it and say what is happening. And so I think that can create some problems, because even though sometimes, that may be your experience, and I think that has been some men experience as well, in their families, I feel like it's still important for you to verbalize what is going on with you. So I'm not sure
Okay.
how we navigate that, because we say we want men to be more open, but sometimes I feel like in being more open, sometimes it can be to your detriment. And not only that too, but sometimes what a lot of men experience is that when you are open about things, then it can be weaponized against you, in arguments in the future. So I told you about something, that um I struggled with the fact that my father was never in my life. And then later down the line, sorry, that gets used against me in an argument. So now I'm left feeling okay. It's not okay for me to say anything, and so I'll not, be open in the future because it has been weaponized against me. So I see a lot of that happening, a lot of men talking about that, and I feel like I'm not sure what the way to move forward is, because there's an expectation from us, to be the sort of new man that feminists may talk about, but at the same time, I feel like in doing so, it can be towards your detriment, being open. So that's
Okay.
my perspective.
So
Madam
Dr.
Chairman, if I
Goddard,
may.
yeah, go ahead, because I saw your wheel spinning.
Yeah, yeah. So in science, we speak about randomized control studies, and now the latest buzzword is real world studies. So what is the real world painting of this scenario? We have men on the streets now, boys on the streets, because they're no longer fulfilling the academic roles, they're no longer matriculating to get to the better schools. Even here recently in Barbados, our local common entrance exams, the girls knocked the boys completely out of the field. They were non-existent in boys' pass rates. All the best schools went to majority girls. So a lot of the men now are marginalized because they're no longer going to the prominent schools. They're no longer getting that aspect of society where they can see as maybe tough bird like before, and they can beat their chests. Here's so what do? They look for a masculine role which they can equate to. So they look around them. Who do they see? The boys on the blocks, the men on the street, the boys smoking the wheeled park out with all the chains and motorcycles and so on. So then they get into the culture of the gangs because they're looking and seeking leadership roles. So when they see this tough looking man who is commanding all his minions, they want to be part of that. So now they're getting teachings and they give respect to some person who is not necessarily their equal, but is what they crave because they want to be recognized and marginalized. So they're learning all the bad traits. So if you extend that down to relationships, we now have in the Caribbean hateful relationships, abusive relationships now coming out because the tough guy has to show leadership. So he has to be able to beat down the boys, or he has to have 1,000,001 girls who he can disrespect, but show he's the alpha male. So when they leave it with that example and they take it into relationships, the girls are like, where are you bringing that? I want someone who's tender, or I want someone who's loving. Yet at the same time, because the girls are being pushed into the academic side or pushed to the front, they're now craving the raw side of life. So even though they're not professionally all put together, they're craving loving and the rawness that will balance them out. So they end up going to the bad boys or having relationships which may be abusive, and they stay in this. So you see, the real world perspective now is confused because here I have done what I'm supposed to do. I'm the top queen. I've done all there is in academia and I'm recognized. Yet my life is empty. I don't have a partner who matches me. The man of my age group is no longer able to stimulate me or to satisfy me. So they turn to the bad boy. But the bad boy doesn't know the finesse of life. So he's abusive or he doesn't show the respect and so on that the lady wants. So these discords in society now is what the young females are faced with. And what do they select, or who do they select from? So we are struggling to find the root of where we have gone wrong in society. We may have said earlier, the family structure is broken, the community is broken, but it comes down to where have the role models gone? Who are now the active role models, and by what criteria are we using to say this is a role model? So we're now in a paradigm shift where the women are now the academics, the boys are on the streets. Relationships can't be balanced. So you end up having multiple relationships, you're having abusive relationships, and you have a pseudo role model because it's only satisfying a need that you need to balance out that moment. If you look at the statistics, career women are no longer having children. That's the reality. Career women are no longer getting married. Or if they get married, it's for face and show, and they divorce quickly. Or more women now are cheating than men because they're lacking a lot of things in their own personal relationships, because having reached where they've reached, their partners are no longer equal with them and they're lacking. So all of these discards now are in the pepper pot. So we have a serious problem. So I think we need to dispel what should be and look to solve the real scenario. But that means dissecting the community into so many small sections. Where do we start and how can we go? So I want to hear the sociologist's point of view, because it should be an interesting pepper pot as we go forward.
It's basically a lot of confusion, I call it, especially for our young males. The social expectations are so varied, and it's at what I call it a multi-level in the society, where you have certain sectors of the society have certain expectations, and let me give you a real life narrative that I heard. Um, a young man and his girlfriend attended a function, and a fight broke out, and he was trying to escape with her because he didn't want to get hurt, right? And the next day, she ended the relationship, right? She ended the relationship because she felt, that he actually was too tender. In other words, she said that she doesn't want any punk man. You understand me? Because in her subcultural little group, basically, they are actually gravitating to men who are rough, men who are more adventurous and so forth. So I'm saying, the reason why I'm saying is a lot of social confusion. To be well dressed today as a man, as a young man, being immaculately dressed will be looked at with suspicion, Don't you know that? And people will kind of tip him on the feminine side, there is a social expectation of how men should look, young men should look, how young men should behave, and if they don't fit, that social expectation, a label is being placed on them, and a label basically that can cause even further confusion in terms of masculinity and the whole issue of identity and what have you. All right, what do we expect? We do not have basically what I call any straight line, that we expect them to talk, I'm talking about young adult men and so forth. What makes a man a man? Is a very important question, And Dr. Barry Jevons, he wrote this book, Learning to be a Man, when I was growing up, entering adulthood as a man, basically one of the signs was the smoking of cigarette. So once you start smoking cigarette, then society basically will start seeing you as a man now because you're smoking cigarette. But does smoking cigarette really makes a man, or a young adult a man, and so forth? What are the social expectations that we have of these young people? So what our young males, especially nowadays, are going through is a lot of identity crisis and confusion. Who am I? As an individual, what are my expectations? What are the expectations that society have of me? And there is a lack of clarity, in terms of masculinity and all of those things, because I said that there's a lot of mis-socialization, especially with gender socialization. All right. What, for example, do we expect? If a man shows too much emotions, what happened? What do we say in society? That men shouldn't cry, right? As a matter of fact, I met a young man and see in a function and you see, dancing, they say, bad man do dance. So this thing is going to some extreme, with regard to social expectation. all right, that is really confusing for a lot of young boys coming up into adolescence, and adolescence into young adults, and what have you, and what have you. So in the past, there was more clarity, with regard to the social expectation of young men and all of those things and what have you. But today is very, very confusing, because there is this mixed, I call it social expectations, that society have. Okay, in certain social circles, for example, right? Maybe on a more professional level, there is a certain expectation. On a subcultural level, there is another social expectation again. So there is a lot of identity confusion, and that's why today we have what I call an overabundance, of toxic masculinity, hegemonic masculinity, and all of those things in the face of, you understand me, women advancement and all of those things, because this is critical, this is critical. And we talk about a lot of social pressure, and the pressure can be overbearing. It's easier said than done, that they know what to do. They were brought up in this nice family, but there's a lot of social pressure, especially with the transition, from let's say adolescence into young adulthood and all of those things. There's a lot of social pressure these days.
I think that's a great point. The main thing that I'm taking away from you is that, the expectations are varied, and that makes figuring out where you fit into society very difficult. And I think for me as a therapist, I think about when I'm meeting clients for the first time and trying to use a strengths-based perspective with them to help them figure out who are they and what is their value. I really don't focus so much on their gender. I'm focusing on, I ask them the question of like, the people who know you, what it is that they love about you. What do people say about you? What are the positive things that people say about you? Because that can help you understand where your true value is. And I think sometimes we place too much value on the external society in terms of what our roles are, and that can change from time to time. So it becomes very confusing for a person. And that really isn't helpful for a lot of people. And so thank you so much for giving those perspectives, because I think we need to ask ourselves more outside of gender. What is it about me that I bring into this world that is unique and valuable? Right? Maybe it doesn't always have to focus on whether you're a man, whether you're a woman. Maybe the focus needs to be on what is it about me that is valuable as a person, because you are a person first before anything else. And so I'm going to ask this next question. So what lessons about manhood did you inherit from the men in your life, and how are you unlearning or even passing down differently today some of the things that you learned? And anyone can chime in and answer this question.
My take would be different. I wouldn't say there's anything that I feel like I have to unlearn. And I say that because I feel like I've been fortunate to have a good father figure in my father. And I can say what he has modeled for myself and my brothers is that when I watch him, I see it's important to be hardworking, to be disciplined, to be consistent, to be reliable. Not only that, but it's important to value family and to work towards providing for your family, seeing about the needs of your family. I see it's important to respect women and to treat them with dignity. I see it's important to have integrity. And sometimes I think there's an emphasis for men that sometimes maybe status and money can be, more valuable than integrity. But watching him, I think you can lose money, you can lose status, but having integrity and having a good reputation is something that someone can never really take away from you. And so what I would say is that I want to do my best to, model my behavior after him. And, my goal is to try my best to emulate him in the way, that I navigate my life, and that when I have my family, that I will do these same things. I think it's important also to have a good reputation, not just for yourself and for your family, but those around you. Because sometimes people can be looking to you, for inspiration, because maybe they may be lacking, these figures for themselves. So I think it's important because you can be a beacon for other people and be an inspiration to them without you knowing. So less unlearning and more, I would say, modeling, and hopefully, I would be in a position to pass some of these values down.
I agree with Leon there a lot. I think I've been blessed because my life has been balanced. I grew up with a strong father figure. My father would always be there for me when I was studying at university and so on. I would come in at late hours, sometimes midnight, sometimes 1 o'clock. I would always find my father at the kitchen table sitting down. The newspaper would be open, the TV would be on, and he'd be fast asleep. But I mean, touching home, I just reading. But in fact, he was just sitting there waiting to know that I was home and being there in case I had a bad day. I could just sit and talk to someone, or I could still dispel whatever was in my head that was causing chaos before I could close the night. So he was always there that I could at least say I can get rid of all my negative energy before I turn in at night. And I really appreciate that because some days are bad days and you just need to let it out. But you have this public face going on in your head or this persona that must be there. But you got a loose screw that needs to be tightened and it just has to come out first and you retread it and put it back in. So he provided that for me. But then I have a flip script. My mother and my auntie, God rest their souls, provided me with some lessons of life, which I call the respect speech. And I don't know if it is something divinely given to women, but both of them at the same time always taught me to respect women, respect who you are, listen first, have that kind ear and eye first. And through them, I have been able to appreciate life differently. And I can both listen and react. But then I'm always guided by their impact on me to say, before you speak a harsh word, put yourself in the other person's place first. See what they may have experienced, digest it, and then react. But you're also human. Sometimes you're just burning to react to a situation. But your lifeline and your guidance is somehow what feeds you into that next step. So I think there is a true balance created by both men and women, and you need both overall. So I can understand how hard it is for a single parent to parent children, but that's what you should call your extended family. There must be a male figure, a family friend in your life that can impart into your child something that you can't. In this day and age, you got screen people, but you know your friends, you know what they're capable of, you know their limitation, you know what you would want of your child to know. So expose them to some degree of that figures so that you can get a balanced side of feminine and masculine side. But balance is required throughout society.
Thank you. I'm hearing a lot about receiving really good examples of what manhood is. And from what Dr. Goddard said, you didn't just get that from your dad, you got that from your mom as well. And maybe it boils down to, again, what is it to be a good person, right? Or like a person who brings value into other people's lives in terms of safety, right? On all levels. How can we be a safe space for other people? Learning to listen, right? And it's not just about what can you provide physically as a man, but what else can you create that would have people be happy to see you every time you walk through the door, right? And usually it's those things that you can't count and you can't quantify that show up. Dr. Douglas, Mr. Douglas, you could tell me if you want to respond to this one. If not, we can.
Of course, I would like to respond to this because this is critical, and unfortunately, I would say that my mother fathered me, you know. But I learned quite a lot, from the men, uncles, and others within the extended family structure. Seeing them, for example, express their love, not in a very, what I call intimate or emotional way, but they express that love in being good providers, if they have to work maybe extra jobs, they have to moonlight, work overtime, just to adequately provide for their family, because sometimes we tend to measure, we use certain measurements in terms of how do we measure, for example, love in the expressions, and there might be individuals who might not be very expressive in terms of their emotions and what have you. But they show that love in different ways, that love basically would be shown in ensuring, that the welfare of the family is intact, that there is no lack in the family. I'm talking about the physical aspect now. The family is well protected. There is a present-centeredness, and involvement. And I think Dr. Goddard touched a little bit on that, because you can be present at home and still be absent, right? Because there is physical presence, and sometimes we confuse the two, right? Being present at home um, and not actually being involved is one thing. And being present at home, and have constant engagement with children and so forth is another thing. So it's critical, it's critical at that juncture for me to see that I've done quite a lot, from men in how they actually care for, their families and so forth. And I know people may see them, and because we have a way of how we try to categorize people, we label people and so forth. And I think you made mention earlier on about the internal, the internal, because sometimes we focus a little too much on the external, right? And sometimes we don't see the goodness in individuals because we cannot see the internal, what is happening within that individual, and the whole dynamics that are taking place, within that individual. But all in all, I must say, despite the whole marginalization, that a lot of our men basically would have experienced, because we know in the Caribbean society, there is this inclination, for what is called the matrifocal family, and that has a lot to do basically with the marginal role. It's not that the men, they're not playing a role, but sometimes the roles are basically marginalized, marginalized. They are the margin. We still see it happening in our modern society, right? They might be providing, yes, all for all the needs of the society, but in terms of involvement, the mother might be more involved in terms of she's the one taking the children to the doctor, she's the one attending the PTA meetings and so forth and what have you. Okay, and again, that's why we cannot deduct, the importance of gender socialization is critically important. Right, and this can be passed on from one generation to the next, right? Because that's how daddies function. That's how daddies function, and it can go way back, Where do we break the cycle? Where do we, for example, start looking at men differently and having different perception and the whole conception of gender? And I'm sorry if I really overemphasizing that this evening in your program, but I see it as a real problem, in what we do, right? Okay, for example, in my home, I've been married for 31 years, right? I do 95% of the cooking and baking, right? People see me in the supermarket shopping, they look at me differently. You understand me? In other words, your wife should be doing this. And this is part of the whole hegemonic masculinity that I spoke about, right? Because we do not understand what it is really and truly in the Caribbean cultural space. We really do not understand the whole concept of masculinity and femininity. And I think that is creating a lot of problems, because if we fully understand those things, there will be less, right, intimate violence, and what have you, intimate personal violence. And a lot of these social scourge that affects our society basically will be reduced just because of an enlightenment and with a new consciousness, of those things. I think that not they would be eliminated, but there will be a drastic reduction in those things because we will learn how to live together, you understand me, as individuals, not so much as the gender-based thing, but as individuals and understanding and accepting each other.
So, Mr. Douglas, you're bringing up some points that I feel like for me is a whole other panel discussion, because I feel like I need a whole other 2 hours to discuss what it means to be masculine and feminine. And you're giving me so many ideas about like maybe blogs that we need to write and put out about what it really means, because I think you're absolutely right about sometimes we focus a lot on the meaning of masculinity and femininity as things that are more physical and the outward. But for me, learning about the divine feminine and the divine masculine helped me to understand a lot more what it means. And it's not just about things like cooking and who's providing the money. It's about things
Definitely.
who is going to advocate, right? It's about self-advocacy and emotional awareness, and like it's a whole other panel discussion. So thank you for bringing that up, because I think it's really important, and I think there's a lot more room for us to begin those types of conversations. So you also brought up something, Mr. Douglas, about providing, right? You spoke about providing, and we know that historically men are providers in the household, which means they spend a lot of time working and sometimes not enough time resting. There are now calls for us as people to begin prioritizing rest so that we don't burn out. So do you see any barriers that exist, particularly for men, in making rest a priority?
Of course, it's important. It's important and that's why I'm saying that there must be a shift, whole perception, a shift in that, because you see, we live in a patriarchal society, male-dominated society, and
I don't know
we
if
have
some men would agree with that, but go
no,
ahead.
the society is still highly patriarchal, and it is actually seen in many of our institutions. There are in certain institutions where women, even though yes, they may be more qualified, they actually would not hold certain positions, and what we still have it. We have to be realistic. There are certain churches, for example, where women are still, you understand me, sidelined, and they cannot perform certain duties and all of those. But that's a whole different topic, maybe for a different discussion and what have you, right? But the whole issue of provision and what have you, and hence the reason why, and this is important, hence the reason why sometimes you have, again, a lot of these power struggles. This power struggle. I read, and I tried to save this article for a number of years. I got it from the Barbados Carlisle Nation newspaper a few years ago, titled "So She is the Breadwinner." And the guy was actually sharing, his experience, with being the person who is not seen within his home as the actual provider. And that was creating some issues and so forth. So earlier on, I spoke about the societal expectation and how do we fit in with that, because it's as well to do our own internal evaluations of ourselves, knowing, for example, who we are in terms of self-awareness and all of those things. These things are important, all right? But how in all of this, all right, I decide to rest, all right? I decide intentional rest, not sickness rest. Because there are some men only rest when they are sick, but I'm talking about deciding, okay, today for my mental health, I'm taking the day off and I'm just taking a sabbatical I'm going someplace where I can enjoy myself by myself, treat myself, and what have you. This is the kind of rest that I'm talking about, right? And sometimes some men might be afraid to take that kind of rest. Again, because of the externalities, how they might be seen. You understand me? And all of those things. So remember, society is a looking glass, is a looking glass. And if we are not careful, would happen with us is that our lives basically would be shaped, by these externalities. Okay, so I want to take a rest, but I'm feeling guilty. I feel people will look at me differently if I do that, and all of those things. So there are a lot of, what I call prohibitive factors, that will cause men in particular who need rest for the mental health and so forth, not to take rest because of how they felt that they will be looked at in society.
So, Dr. Goddard, I see your wheel spinning, and I'm curious, do you relate at all to what Mr. Douglas is saying about men feeling this guilt around resting?
I was hoping you didn't call on me because my devil's hat is on at the moment, you see, because I am seeing, and I agree with the rest concept in today's world. Today's world, we're burning both ends of the candlestick and we're overworking. So the cycle of rest is necessary in that framework. Now, don't judge me. Leave that alone. Let us go back to the 50s and the 60s. The men blast rocks. They work on construction. They work in Panama Canal and the whole works. They were physical beings. In those times, the men were also the village rams. They moved from house to house to house. So here the societal structure provided for the different needs of the men. The outside woman concept provided the psychologist, the priest, the conscience, and so on. So when the man's internal frustrations and so on came about, men move across the village from the ram shops to the different places on the way home. And those provided medicine holes for the man. So it not only fixed the physical, but the psychological and so on. So the physical attribute of the man and the workout and the exhaustion was there, but the mental exhaustion was more. And that was treated in the community, in the society, at the ram shops and the various holes that he would stop on his way home. So rest is not necessarily physical. It also has a mental component where the release and the relief comes from. So if the society or the home structure provides that, when that man comes home and he detaches, his body shuts down, his mind has been mentored to, and he will roll and go again. But in today's world, there's no outlet for these other aspects of the physique and psyche. So people then hide away by overworking multiple jobs. So the mental burnout, which is not being addressed, is what will kill them. The anger issues, the anger management, the suicidal rates are now emanating from this because the physical body is exhausted, but the medical, the emotional and the mental highway is on fire, and there's no outlet for these. So I go back to a community, find blocked space where it's not just violence and smoking, but outlets where people are being ministered to and have action points. If we can get ministers to put money in the block scenario, don't just build pavilions and playing fields, but that would help. But have programs or workshops at these said stops that men can go and be men. You know how women have skill training and so on? Men can do the same thing. So rather than just smoking weed and so on, you can give them craft and trade and so on, and then give them avenues that they can burn their physical energy, but still have something they're proud of. And that starts there. If the community can't do it, then give them silos that they can go and do it and still penetrate the community from there and become vantage points. So when we do that, we now give the block mentality a purpose and a vision and hope, because we have to shift away from academia now. I think academia has been beaten. Doctors can't find jobs, lawyers can't find jobs, they're on the streets begging and whatever else to get position. What happened to the plumbers and the carpenters and the joiners now? Those are the needs, because construction is booming. So we need more of these people. So create jobs for the people on the blocks to do these things and show them the way forward. And society will reintegrate again and grow. So as I said, my devil's hat was on and not the other hat. So I just need to get my 2 cents in on that.
Thank you so much. Very interesting responses. I'm really hearing from you, Dr. Goddard, that there aren't healthy spaces to cope, right? And maybe we need to be thinking and talking about what does healthy coping look like for men, because everyone is overstimulated these days in our society. We live in a very fast-paced society now. So, and I think that's an interesting point.
Just chime in there quickly, Desarie. Carlisle made a very important point that sometimes we overlooked in our society. I call it in Grenada, the fraternity of the rum. All right, the fraternity of the rum.
The brotherhood.
And, yeah, and people, rum friends are closer than church friends. I may get some fires here for that tonight, but the intimacy that they share, the openness with which they communicate, and I had a brother who was an alcoholic, so I can testify to that, and how actually that rum shop basically would have brought them together, at a distressing point, and we're talking mental health and all of those things. So, yes, while we may see, for example, the consumption of alcohol, the drinking of rum by the corner shop as something that is negative in the community and what have you, but within, when you get into the internal space, you realize, that it's a debriefing space for many people, and people who are overworked, and sometimes on the way home, before they get home, in sociology, we talk about that, the whole reconstruction of the adult personality and all of those things. But even before the person gets home to get that done, I pass by the rum shop or maybe some little village space where they can play some games, maybe sedentary games like a game of draft or some other game, basically. That can help a lot, with the whole issue of rest and mental rest, and all of those things, because this is really critical in every low-income community, which we call the ghetto and what have you. That's why governments ensure that there are some playing facility there, whether it's a basketball court or something, because to help relieve the pressures, the social pressures, especially the young men, would encounter from time to time. I live in a footballing community in Grenada, and I can testify, that had it not been for football, we would have had a lot of more social problems, especially those plaguing our young adult men in particular, right? Because it takes up a space. It helps them get involved in very positive activities. And what that does for them, it helps them to cope with whatever stresses they might be experiencing at the time.
So if I can get my last point here, I think you already hit the nail here, because the no rest is due to the economic pressures that we're under. People now are trying to meet so many mortgage and bills and increasing inflation. They have to do so many jobs, and everybody wants them done now, even in normal life. So the pressures of the workplace, the pressure of the workspace, the lack of finances, and as I said earlier, doctors and lawyers can't find jobs anymore. So even if the top tier professions can't find jobs, where does that leave the bottom tier? So now there's this economic battle going on. So everyone is mentally confused, mentally fatigued, and physically burnt out. Because having reached a job that you should get money or expect money to come from, you can't even get a job. So now you do 2 and 3 and 4 or 5 jobs, and therein lies the problem. You cannot be effective at 5 jobs, and then you have a family because you haven't added that yet. And then you have children of different ages, you have to send to school, you have to prepare, you have to prep them, so it's past burnt out, but that's driven by economics and lack of job space or increased pressure within the workspace. So all of this comes to the mental aptitude of the person. In Barbados, we have a current crime wave at the moment. And so one of my patients asked me today, all these young men killing off one another, how we expect to have children going forward? Because if all the men are dead, who can impregnate the women? And that made me pause, because that's now serious on a different level, because the expectation of all these gang wars and so that may be occurring and the young men injuring themselves. Barbados already has an aging population. And if the young people kill themselves off now, then where are we going? Our future now is severely restricted.
So, Mr. Claude, you're talking about, all of these spaces that we used to have in the past that we don't have as many of these spaces in terms of sporting and things like that. Or from Dr. Goddard's perspective, maybe there isn't time because of the economy that we live in. And it takes me back to, again, some of the expectations that we put when it comes to gender roles, in that this current society does not allow for the old traditional gender roles. Because if a man is to be the only one in the household who is providing financially, the average man is going to have 2 and 3 jobs, right? Back in the day when things were a lot more affordable, it worked for one person to be providing, because maybe they would be able to do that on one salary, but it's just not practical anymore. And I think we have to really question whether the old guard is working anymore, and we have to be honest and realistic about that and bring more balance, so that we both genders and everyone can have space to rest, because it's needed. And so in thinking about how do we grow, I'm curious for our panelists, what are some of the practices, whether it's personal, professional, or communal? What are some of the things that have helped you the most in navigating your manhood and your mental wellness in your own lives?
Having purpose, I think number one, has helped me a lot, because I feel like having a sense of direction, like knowing where you're going in life, what you're working towards, I think that can help your life make sense and give it meaning, especially when you're trying to build something, like build a future for yourself, to build your career and the things in your life. So I think that has helped me. I think the second thing is having a sense of community and friends that I can be accountable to. So my friends have been a big part of my life. Not only my friends, but my twin, who's here, with us to, in the chat, and they have always been there for me. To lend a listening ear and to also to keep me in line. So sometimes maybe I may want to take a certain direction, and I will talk to my friends. I'll talk to my brother, and I'll ask him, should I do this? Should I make that decision? And sometimes, even though I may see things, a particular way, and I may be, dead set on it, sometimes they can pull me back and allow me to, to reevaluate and to maybe, think more deeply about my choices. So I think that has helped me a lot, just having people to be accountable to, and people I can rely on and be open with, people that will keep me on the straight path and not, lie to me or, say things that I want to hear. And I think the final thing is prioritizing my health. So both my physical and mental health. I think for me, just taking time to exercise, on a weekly basis, playing basketball, going for walks, going for runs, that has helped me a lot. And it has allowed me to kind of take myself, out of being in my mind. Because sometimes I can be, lost in thoughts. I can be thinking a lot, and maybe going out playing basketball for an hour, 2 hours, maybe going for a walk can allow me to clear my head, reevaluate. And I always leave it feeling, better than, when I started. So these are the things that have helped me in my life. And, I think I would recommend them for any young man, trying to navigate their life.
I can just add a little. I think you hit the nail on the head. Having a focus and having a support group are just the two key elements. For me personally, being a part of the Lions Club International family, the Lions, the world's largest service organization, has been the best move ever made for me. My French teacher in the days of secondary school invited me to join the Leo Club, which was a junior member of the Lions Club International. And through Lions, I have met friends who are just my family. If I feel out at any point, I can call any one of them, and they will be my priest, my policeman, my sergeant of arms. I can just in that safe space say to them anything, and they know me by now to just say he needs a moment, and they'll give me that moment, and there's no judgment. If I travel any in the world, I can just go to home and lie down with one of them because we're that close in friendship. And it's just that friendship. And that is what squares my shoulders and keep me balanced. So having a support group, and support group comes out to the weirdest relationships, And I believe in God, and I believe that God just puts people in your life at the right time that brings balance. So when all is lost, just find that quietness, and a friend will appear and help you balance. So having a focus or a purpose and having a support background will always tether you in this life.
Thank you. And Mr. Douglas, anything from you?
Basically the same, on the same line, having supportive, what my friend will call soldiers. A soldier is more than a friend. When somebody say that, this man is my soldier, to have some good soldiers around you, that will understand, what you are going through, what the challenges that you face from day to day, and they basically can be what I call honest critic in your life. Will tell you as it is. It's important that you have those kind of people in your social circles, because they will help you to navigate much easier, through those challenges, those rough seas that you will go through, the storms of life that you will go through from time to time. Because you may think that you understand everything about you, but there might be people who understand you more than you understand yourself. You understand me? In terms of the interaction with you. So I want to just share and support the views of the two other panelists, that a supportive network of friends is critical in terms of helping you build and maintain that level of masculinity, that will carry you through. Self-awareness is critical for me also, knowing who you are as an individual, right? And living a life in despite of, what others, because some of us, we like to go with the flow. We feel it's majority something, I don't go with that. I do what is best for me. You understand me? After analyzing certain things, looking at certain things and what have you, because I want to rest easy at night. I want to make sure when I make decisions that its decisions resonate quite well with me, not making decisions that will please others, to get into a certain social circle. And then at night, you have issues, mental issues now, because you know that you were not supposed to have done that, or said that, during the conversations and what have you. So what is important to have very good, supportive friends, or what I call soldiers, around you to help you to navigate the whole issue of manhood and masculinity.
Great points. I think finding purpose is definitely key, and I think that the point on finding your people is really important too. And for the people that are listening who may be saying to themselves, I don't have people around me who really inspire me to do better. One of the benefits that we have is now we live in a global society, even with just social media. And Dr. Goddard would have brought up the Lions Club. Getting involved in programs like that could expose you to people that you don't necessarily have access to in your community, right? So, and it also helps you to connect to some sort of a purpose. So I think those are some really, really good points. And in regards to self-awareness, yeah, figuring out not just who you are, but what works for you, right? So figuring out, okay, when I'm around these types of people, I notice this is how I behave and this is what it brings out of me, right? So knowing yourself and taking that time to reflect on how people and places affect you so that you can make better decisions for yourself is so important. And so today on this panel, we have a mental health professional, we have a medical doctor, we have a sociologist. And so I wanted to ask each of them a specific question to get a sense from them, from their professional perspective. And so, Mr. Douglas, I'm going to start with you. On education and systems, how do you think the education system and other institutions in the Caribbean support or maybe fail young men in preparing for adulthood? And what are some of the shifts that you'd like to see?
Well, basically, notwithstanding that they would have done, a measure of work, but I'm still not satisfied. I believe that the education system and other social institutions can do much more than they are doing right now, to help our young males and so forth. Our education system is one that focuses on examinations. We don't teach the whole person. We prepare them from primary school. We prepare them for exit examinations, whether it was the common entrance or the CPEA, whatever it's been called, right? We go to secondary school, we prepare them again to pass the CSEC, right? We go to the advanced stage, we prepare them to pass the CAPE. They go to medical school, the medical board exam. And, sometimes we focus so much on exams. Yes, I'm not discounting the importance of exams. But what I'm trying to bring out here, we need to teach the whole person, right? So in the curriculum, we need to include in the curriculum, and that can be incorporated. We don't have to have a subject on social skills, right? A good educator knows exactly how to incorporate life skills within any subject, whether it's mathematics or chemistry or sociology or biology. Any good educator would be able to incorporate those life skills. And we need those life skills because that major lack, this deficiency in our education system is creating a lot of problem in our society today. So you have people graduating from schools, but they are not fit for, you understand me, taking up roles in the wider society because academia alone can't do it. You understand me? Academia alone, I'm repeating that for emphasis. Academia alone cannot do it. We may have all these subjects, but if we do not have basic life skills, all right, to navigate and to face those challenges, that we encounter from day to day, it will be very difficult transitioning, from a school system into the wider society and taking up roles in a very effective manner. So my recommendation rather, for schools and institutions, especially within the family, is really to focus on those things. How do, for example, we prepare? And I'm talking not only the education system, I'm talking about the church. I'm talking about, yes, we might know the Bible, we know everything, all these narratives in the Bible and what have you as a Christian, but how do I, you understand me, apply those teachings and principles and belief systems to my life that will help me to navigate, you understand me, life in a more successful manner and to be a more successful adult in society.
Excellent, excellent points. When you talk about life skills, I think about things that I didn't learn in school, and some people would not have learned if they weren't doing a specific subject. But I think if we started at the primary level where there is more generalized education, teaching things like emotional intelligence, how to be a good listener, how to read body language, things like how to do a budget, which is so essential for managing your life once you have a job and you're trying to support yourself or support a family. These are some of the basic things that sometimes is missing from the general curriculum. So I think that's an excellent point. Dr. Goddard, a question for you. You're a medical doctor and having a role in helping men. So do you really see doctors in particular, right, in having a role in helping men to identify mental health concerns during treatment. Do you see that as something that could emerge in years to come? And if so, how would this help in preventing things like suicide that affect men at higher rates?
Thank you. So that's an excellent question. But I was still trying to recover from Claude's presentation. It was so beautiful and eloquently said. I think one word missing from his presentation was accountability. Having someone whom your accountability, be it the university, be it the institution, but having that accountability is critical. So I think I would add that to you. To my direct question, tough question, because the changing landscape of medicine is that it's a belt now system where a standard medical consult now is 15 to 20 minutes maximum. We in the Caribbean fight that because when you come to your doctor, you want to pour all your soul and all your complaints and so on. But in the international world now, a medical consult is just that. It's a roller coaster ride for 10 to 15 minutes. So in the international setting, it will be hard to distill and dispel mental issues unless it's a direct complaint. But since it's a Caribbean audience, we will look at it a little differently. The traditional Caribbean doctor knew his clientele or knew his or her clientele. People felt comfortable and confident in their doctor that they could tell and share anything, and vice versa. The doctor felt forward enough, he can bolster areas that may have been a bit of conflict, of intellectual threat or personal threat to the patient, but they knowing it was safe space, they could bolster that question. So in the Caribbean context where doctorate visits are extended, I think this should be part of it. And post-COVID is so much needed now because COVID stripped the banana. It cleared all the protective wrapping of our client's emotional state. People being confined, people being suppressed, people being afraid has left us tattered. Our protective layer has been broken. So person's psyche are exposed. And so there are a lot of mental issues pushing through. Even though I see a lot of diabetes and hypertension, when people sit on my chair and they drop, they have so much to offload first that's preventing them from looking after themselves. So the diabetes can't be good because they're worried about where the next dollar coming from or completing a job task and so on. So their priorities is not about themselves, but rather for others and the consumables thereby. So the traditional doctor role is eroded in today's present tense concept of a doctor. So it means post-COVID, there's a call within the medical professional or fraternity to be your brother's keeper again. And I say again, because before a doctor was presumed to be the priest, the judge, the magistrate, the arbitrator, but now a lot of has changed in this current context. But now with the mental issues being so raw and in front of us, and the issues of burnout and so on, the doctor needs to not only use the eyes and the ears, they must be able to feel the pulse of the patient and what is the true issues. So I think having that careful ear to recognize the unsaid complaint, the unsaid symptom, and then slowly either be in a discourse of the history taken or in the examination, bolster the issue that's being hidden, and then let it happen. So I think your medical doctor whom you trust should be in a role to identify when things are not right and when there's a hidden agenda and how to get there. Now, people believe they have to take what they get at a doctor, and that's something I fundamentally disagree with. You are paying a doctor for a service. If that doctor doesn't have the time to listen to you, find a new doctor. That's the reality. Because people think they're in a process belt. I come to get my plaster put on, but why did you get the cut in the first place? So the old doctor would have asked the necessary questions and see to it. The modern doctor today now, you have a complaint, your stomach hurts you, they come and they feel your stomach only. They don't look above and see that you have a breast lump or that you have a foot oozing or something because they're so focused in that one complaint, they forget to look at the body as a whole. And that is something that we face in the current medical fraternity. people are so pigeon vision or so tunnel vision in what they're looking at that they forget to remember it's a patient in entirety. And mental illness is one of our rawest disorders at the moment, and it has to be addressed. But I teach all my medical students, the eye sees what the mind knows. So unless you're thinking about it, you're going to miss it. So when the patient comes in, you observe them how they're walking into the room. You look at how their body language is talking to you. You look to see how they sit down, if they're going to flunk down, if they're going to be distracted, where their eyes are going. So you're seeing all of that. So by the time you start your interview process, put them at ease, disarm them from all their days' work and so on, and really try to get to the finite problem that's really bothering them. I see many patients who come with terrible blood sugars. I said, doctor, you're gonna crawl today. And I said, yeah, let me hear your story first, you know? So I soften them up, let them open up. And when I realized that there's a bigger problem than just the blood sugars today, I shift my approach. I'm not going to make them feel little about their blood sugar until they're about to leave, because that's my reminder to say, having said all of this though, this is still an issue. So the parting thing will be at the job will be at the sugar, but the interview process will be being guided as to what the underlying issues are or the hidden agenda. So we as healthcare professionals must put back on our priest hats and so on and listen to our patients in this current climate. Mental health illnesses are not being addressed because they're not being sought after and they're not being listened to. If you can be the detective that you're trained to be, then you will spot these things and use your interview time to brochure the issues that are before us. So I will return the floor to you because as I said, I'm very passionate about this particular topic because the current doctors are driven by the wrong thing. And as a result, we are losing sight of what the white coat profession was all about. And that's a sad thing in today's world because now is a time that we need the listeners and the priest and the psychologist and the person who can distill some of the emotional baggage, because that is the root for the underlying physical illness. Thank you.
As a social worker, I respect both of your responses to these questions so much because there's something that you said that I respect and I was also taught. Mr. Douglas, you said educate the whole person. Dr. Goddard, you said treat the whole person. That's what I heard, right? And it is so important because as a social worker, I was taught the effects of stress on the body, on the physical body, and how someone can come into this world with a bunch of genes and traits, and based on what stressors they experience, those genes can be expressed or not expressed, right? So it is so important in your respective professions that people understand that when you're dealing with someone, whether you're educating someone or you're treating someone, they're a person with a life, a home, a family, and it's not just the single issue that they're coming to you with or that they're there to learn about. So I think that's a really powerful lesson to walk away with, is that we need to be focusing on the whole person. So thank you so much for those responses. To you, Leon, how do you see Caribbean men typically responding to emotional or mental health crises as a mental health professional, right? And also, what role does pride or maybe fear of stigma play in seeking help or not seeking help for men?
What I've noticed is that when we're going through something, we have the tendency to withdraw from those around us, so from friends and family. And the idea is that, okay, I don't want to burden the people in my life with what's going on with me. I don't want to stress them out. So what I need to do is I need to try and figure this thing out so that it doesn't, bubble over to areas in my life. And what I find is that in the men withdrawing, it can actually make things worse, But more than that, what I find is that we have the idea that we have a tendency, to externalize our problems, in the sense that we don't think that there's much value in discussing what's going on internally, but instead we think that if we fix the things that are external to us, then it will have the effect of changing our emotions. So for example, I may be worried about, making money, that I'm not making enough, that I need to make ends meet. But I wouldn't say I need to discuss that with friends or family and, maybe work through these emotions. Instead, what we would do is we would say, well, I just need to make more money. So the focus would be on, okay, if I can work hard and make more money, then, that these feelings of anxiety would go away. And so what you find is that, we would say, I just need to lock in, I need to focus. The problem is I'm not focused enough, I'm not working hard enough. Because if I do that, then I can fix, the problems around me, and then, that will go away, the anxiety will go away. And I think we have to kind of move away from that thinking and to be open to the idea of discussing, our feelings. But the problem is, and I think is something central, is that I think a lot of us have the idea that there isn't much utility in discussing our emotions, because a lot of men have the view that, talking about things doesn't really change them. So at the end of the day, yeah, I can talk about my feelings about the bills and all of that, but at the end of the day, I still need more money. So some of them would say that, therapy isn't really useful, because what talking about is going to do. At the end of the day, the problems are still external to me. And I think we need to move away from that thinking and to be open to the idea that, for the most part, we could be wrong and there could be utility in therapy. But whether or not it's true, we owe it to ourselves to explore all the solutions that we have on the table. And what I would say is that I have noticed with, the younger men, so Gen Z, is that they are more open to therapy and they are more open to, talking about their feelings, to being in therapy, but also they're more able to express their emotions and name them and identify them. And that's something I want to commend them for. So though that view of, disregarding therapy has existed, I think it's more existed in, maybe men around my age and older. But I think we've seen a shift from that in the younger men. So, yeah.
Thank you for that, Leon. Before we move on to audience questions, just letting everyone know that if you have a question, you can post it in the chat at this time, and I will read any questions that were sent in prior. But Dr. Goddard or Mr. Douglas, any response to Leon?
I think that he was very clear, So, yeah, I think I will leave my reaction right there.
I agree. It was well said, Leon. So
I'm curious, do you agree that Gen Z is more open to therapy than maybe Gen X or millennials in your experience?
Yes, I will say that, um, from where I actually grew up, basically, people's what is called exposure. We didn't have all this exposure, to those things, while growing up, you know. Um, Today, what you will find, there has been what I call the medicalization, of a lot of things, that we actually took for granted, So in my childhood years, even though a child may exhibit, certain uh, behavioral issues and so forth, the actual response was to beat it out of him, a hard head will lead to a soft buttocks, So it was more physical. Today, we take a more what I call medical approach, to those issues, not only physical, but to mental health issues and all of those things. So I would agree, that because of the exposure, because of public education, and all of those things, people basically are more inclined to seek medical help today and what have you. Even in the field of psychology, people are more apt, to maybe seeking professional help. In the past, a man will tell you, boy, if I cannot fix my problem, nobody can fix it for me. All right. But today there is this realization that there are professionals, people who are trained, to provide those services and that can help individuals with whatever problem, whether it is a psychosocial problem, an economic problem, whatever it is. There are people for every uh, issue that you may experience that can provide professional help.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think exposure plays a big part here, as you said, because the use of the internet now and media, be it television and so on, has played a great part. Look at the role and acceptance of homosexuality or gender issues and violence. Before, in our time, the church and the school were the only two institutions, and whatever dogma they spewed out at the time is what we believe and what we took for granted. Now with TV, you're seeing every major social soap opera have man to man and woman to woman interaction and all type of mixtures of or variations of this. So homosexuality and gender issues have now become so in the face of the current generation that's normal for them. So they're now accepted. Some of them don't even question it, but they accept it. In our time, this corn, the stigma, the social anti-socialist that have come about from that. So because of the exposure now that they have, it is different. Not so here is my problem with the exposure. Having exposed the current generation who is distilling or helping them understand what it means. Because you see something doesn't mean you have an understanding of it. And so the confusion that can ensue from this being your face and no one falls into at least explain the historical aspect where the current movement is and what the futuristic views may be. The current generation is confused. You accept everything, throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Because there's no tethering of what is right, what is wrong, or what can be norm, or what, even if you have permutations of the same thing, but which option and question that option. So there's an acceptance without intellectual distilling of it. So I think explanations or letting them figure it out with guidance is what is missing from the equation. So they're flooded with it, but no one to help them navigate it, leads to some of the confusion that we're experiencing.
Mm. Very interesting viewpoints. And I think we could be here all night, if we try to dissect some of these things. I think I saw one question come in from the live audience, and I have a question that came in prior that I'll ask that question first. So how can increasing our investment in youth programs, rehabilitation, conflict resolution education, and community bonding initiatives positively impact our population and help create safer, more resilient communities? And I think, Mr. Douglas, that speaks to what you were talking about in the very beginning. What are some strategies that can be used to reach the youth of our future? How can we let their voices be heard?
Well, only today, just prior to, this panel discussion, I was having a conversation, with an individual on basically almost the same thing, right? And whatever intervention that we are actually effecting, it must not be cosmetic, right? Because if we do not understand, and the understanding comes quite a lot with interaction with young people and all of those things, right? And if we do not understand what they are going through, the frustration that they are experiencing and all of those things, and it will be very difficult because what is happening a lot today is what I refer to as armchair strategies. People locked away in some office, in some ministry, and whether it's youth or social development, and they want to plan strategies for young people that they have never interacted with. You understand me? That is a failure and will be a failure from the onset because you need to understand their thinking. You need to understand how they feel. And in order to do that, you have to have some interaction, some level of interaction with them, look at their perspective, because remember, we are coming from different backgrounds. We are coming from different generations and what have you, So it may be easier in terms of planning strategies and to help, for example, help them to deal with, like, for example, interpersonal violence, interpersonal conflict, rather than just sitting away from them and writing up some paper about what they should do and what they should not do and how this. But if we actually have some serious interventions with them, sit down under some mango tree, some coconut tree with them, and find out from them, what is it? Because sometimes what we do, we just actually treating the symptom, and not getting to the root cause, of the issues. What is it that is affecting you? Let me just give you a quick example. I know it's kind of running late. I was teaching at a secondary school once, and there was this young lady always throwing up a tantrum around mid-morning, and the principal asked me to administer punishment, which I didn't like, but I did it because I needed my job and so forth. And the second time she asked me, I decided, no, I will use a different strategy. So I brought her behind the school and I said, look, I want to have a serious discussion with you. I said, why is it that are you behaving in this manner? And you know what the answer was? She says, sir, he's hungry, I'm hungry. She came from a very poor family, leaving home without breakfast. And then she couldn't deal with the hunger pangs, sorry, that she was experiencing. As a matter of fact, she was hungry. We have this new word now, between hunger and anger and so forth. And she was actually exhibiting those kinds of behavior. So I'm saying this to say that if we do not really get to the root of our youth problems, we will not be able to plan effective strategies to deal with whatever challenges that they are being faced with. We have to interact with them. We have to go in the community, and sit with them, in their space. Not they coming to us. We have to go to them in their own comfort zone where they can express, what they are feeling. And then we can go back now. And what we are doing now in terms of planning the strategies will be what we call informed, strategic interventions that will be going back to them with, because we got the information from them that will form the basis, for our strategies that we will be formulating and implementing to help deal with those problems and what have you. But to outline those strategies, that will take me about a half an hour again, and I want to prolong the discussion here this evening. But there are a lot of them. Sports, basically, let me just offer quickly. One of them could be sports. Involvement in sports basically will leave them with less downtime, for other negative behaviors and all of those things. So engagement, once they can be engaged in positive civic organizations, the Leo Club, the Lions Club, and all of those things where they can meet like-minded people, that share the same values like them and all of those things, that can help them, and that can be very transformative in their life and so forth. Right, but it's a lot to speak about tonight.
That's an
That used
excellent.
to be the Girl Guides and the Scouts and so on, which don't exist at our level anymore. But to just highlight the last point you said, this comes down to distilling groups that are not politically oriented, because you have to have safe space. And I think utilizing the community as itself to host these interactions is the best way forward. Because when we get government money and so on to do these things, people want to steal the money or they want ownership and different, but it doesn't get to the root of the patient. What I have found in my own medical arena is I do group sessions. So I bring the group together and I give 1 or 2 seeds to a patient and I empower them, and then drop a devil advocate question in the middle. That starts a discussion amongst all the patients in the circle there. And I then let them solve it on their own, because I already thrown the seed out to 1 or 2 persons, which is right along the right guidelines. And it's so interesting to step back and watch how the various comments from the different point of views come in. But in that same group, did they come to a finite solution? Sometimes not even one that I would have thought of. But having heard that they were not alone and had similar point of views and they were hearing each other, brought resolution. I think sometimes in our group settings, we don't hear each other. We think we're alone and we always think we're right. But when that group effect comes about, within that, you can find the quietness and the resolution that you need. So sometimes putting them together in a safe space, you don't fight and cuss out, but in that safe space, they will find the solution on their own. Just guide them.
Yeah. I really like these responses. I think that's a great point that Mr. Claude Douglas brought up of really needs assessment, right? But I like the aspect that you brought up of meeting them where they're at, going into the community rather than pulling them out of it to try to get them to talk to you, right? Meeting people where they're comfortable. I think that's so important. We have one more question from the audience, and then I will ask our panelists to briefly give us your parting words. So this question says, in what ways do businesses play a critical role in the upbringing of young men? Very interesting question.
Businesses?
Businesses, yes.
Yeah, businesses have a very big role to play. You know, sponsorship, you know, in terms of sporting clubs and teams and what have you. They can play a very critical role in that, in terms of lifting their image. You know, I remembered when I was one of the founding members of the Paradise Football Club, you know, which is the top football club in Grenada today. You know, and when we were sponsored by Lime or Flow, you know, those guys felt, you know, that their image, you know, just to be associated, you know, with this transnational corporation, you know, kind of lifted them a little bit, you know. In terms of organized activities within the community that will foster community bonding, you know, the businesses can play a very critical role, because sometimes, you know, you have community-based organizations who want to conduct, you know, certain activities, you know, but you know that they don't have the resources in order to do that. And that's basically where the business people can actually come in. You can do that also through scholarships. You know, the business community can play a great role. We have a young man with a lot of potential within the community, but again, too, he cannot self-finance, you know, through maybe a community college or even university. And that's where the businesses can come in and give him that golden opportunity. All right. So there are a lot that the businesses can do, and they are actually giving back, you know. You know, they are actually, when they do that, they are actually giving back. One of our biggest, what I call, sporting event in Grenada is the intercollegiate sports, the intercol. Yeah, and the
Yeah,
sponsors, you know,
that's our
I know
second
that they are,
carnival.
yes, a second carnival. I like how you put it. And you know, the sponsors basically play a very great role in that every year. You know, and apart from the gold sponsors, you have also businesses, people now coming in and sponsoring schools, you know, individual schools and all of those things. So that the schools now, the image, public image in terms of the uniform and all of those things. And what that does, it has a positive impact on the self-esteem of those young people and what have you. So you're not just coming out anyhow. You are well uniformed now. You have your track suits and all of those spikes and all of those things, because those things are sponsored. So they can play a very, very, very great role in terms of investing, right? And we need more and more investors and larger investments in our youth in order to get them engaged in those positive, you know, activities, whether it's community-based or on a parish level or whatever. And that basically will help them, you know, be more focused, you know, and take a more purposeful role in society and in their own individual lives.
I also think leading from the front is also a good part of corporate sponsorship. Walking the community, seeing the needs of the community, and then doing something. Because sometimes if you go spouting too much money, you can be seen as a cash cow. And that might create a conflict because of the expectation that people only want money for support. I think if some of the businesses were to walk in their own community and meet, say, with the boys on the block on a Friday evening and say, let's have a hand of dominoes and talk something else. Or let's go around tidying up a wall and say, boys, can you come and help us paint here and there? Get them involved at a level where they can see the hand-to-hand mentoringship coming. You see, where I agree sponsorship is needed, I'm also fearful that looking for a cash out or payout gives the wrong impression. And I don't know if it's a line in me. I like hands-on. So I like engaging the community where I can get them to come out because we need to rebuild our communities. I remember the days in Barbados when I was a child, Independence Day, the whole community came out on the street and everybody opened one big pot and you're drinking and you're cooking up and you're eating. And that was an all-night jam. I know we as young boys were so bad, we would try to teach some of the food and go off in our own corners and do boys things. But that is lacking. So if you can get a community or a firm or company in the community that starts to engage the young men to do some of these things and come back out, that is mentorship in action. And I think that is where corporate businesses need to spend a little time mentoring.
Yeah, and it would really give young men in the community access to people that they may not have had access to, right? Because maybe if they see this business owner engaging the community, they can have conversations that they would not have been able to have, or learn things from that person that they would not have been able to learn. So yeah, that community engagement aspect is so important. Someone in the audience responded saying, corporate social responsibility is more than just providing money for activities and groups. It really helps boost the morale of many individuals and helps the family dynamic in some situations. Someone else said, let's not forget the importance of follow-up after intervention. So don't make it a one-time thing. And I think that's an excellent point as well. So thank you so much for having such an insightful conversation with us tonight. A final question to our panelists. What is one piece of advice that you would give to young Caribbean boys who are trying to define what it is to be a man in today's world? Briefly tell us.
Knowing who you are, is critical. Knowing who you are as a person is critical. And you basically are a unique individual, right? And therefore, your life basically, should be organized on the basis of your self-awareness. Who am I as an individual? What is it that I want out of life? And also to encourage them, to be focused on their goals, despite, the many distractions around them. They should always keep focused on what is it that they want for themselves, what is it that they want to do for society in terms of their contribution to society. Being purpose-driven and focused are very critical in realizing, the whole masculinity and also to navigating, and I'm using this word quite a lot this evening, navigating the whole challenges of life, that can easily distract them from achieving whatever goal that they set out to do.
Thank you, Mr. Douglas. Leon?
Well, my answer would be similar in terms of purpose. I think it's very important to set a goal very early in life and to work towards achieving that goal, and to understand that in the pursuit of greatness, in the pursuit of that goal, that you'll run into challenges, you'll run into problems. It would take some time, to build what future that you want, but having that purpose and having that goal will add meaning to the struggle and maybe to the suffering that you might experience in that journey to getting that goal. And I will also add that when I say a goal, I don't see it as, maybe, making your first million or just having a house or a car. I think that goal should be something that would take a lifetime to achieve. Maybe you wouldn't necessarily reach it in your lifetime as well, but something that would keep you grounded and keep you focused, throughout your life, that you would continue striving towards. And I think that would add meaning to your life, and that would add a lot more than material things can add. So that would be my piece of advice.
Thank you. Dr. Goddard?
Thank you. I'm a strong believer in the Ubuntu's philosophy, which basically says, I am because you are. And what does that mean? We are a family. We came from a family. We came from a village. We may have grown, but we have not outgrown the village. It is time to go back to the basics. People need to care for each other. People need to look out for each other. People need to be responsible for each other and mentor each other. So in essence, I would love to see a world where we just simply care about each other again. We are so caught up with the I, the me. But who was there before you? Who paved the way? Who brought you here? You didn't just appear. So in all our jealousies and our negativities and so on, just remember you're not alone. And some creation brought you to this point. So if you can just pause for a moment and think that life is not just about me, but bigger than I am. And who am I am because we are. So go back to the root, find your community spirit, and build the next person up. I know from a personal point of view, without my aunt in my life, I would not be the person who I am. She changed the way I saw life. And I will give more credit than my own parents for making me who I am. And it took my outside interaction with her to reshape me. So I know I'm not who I am because of just it was a community that was around me at that time. And God has created the stepping stones. I keep meeting more people who add to me. And that's what we need. So you're not singular. So look from your around you, look from where you've come from, know the historical background, and then propel using the sail and the veins from those who are around you to take you forward. That would be my parting shot.
Excellent advice. I really hope that our audience is walking away tonight feeling enriched by everything that they've heard. I heard some excellent points about finding your motivation and finding your purpose, and finding your community, right? Because the community is there, and figuring out what is one cause that I believe in that maybe I can be able to connect with other people on, whether that means joining some community group or maybe creating my own, right? And Mr. Douglas talked about developing your self-awareness. And if you're feeling like you don't know how to do that, I can say that as a therapist, meeting with a counselor is an excellent way to develop your self-awareness because it's one of the first things that we work on. Because without self-awareness, we can't actually solve any problems. We need to be able to identify ourselves and identify what is going on before we can address any issues. So self-awareness is so important. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask one of our colleagues who played a really integral role in bringing our panelists together here today. Terry, would you please give us some parting words?
Hi, everyone, and good night. To everyone who joined tonight, thank you so much for being here. Special thank you to the men on this call for having this conversation with us. We hope that you would have found something inspiring to take away. Thank you to Desarie and her team for creating spaces like this to help groom and grow our young people, specifically our men. To Leon, Brother Claude, and Lion Carlisle. Thank you. I've known you guys personally and professionally, and you guys could have chosen to be anywhere tonight, anywhere, because you are professionals, busy professionals, but you chose to be here with us at CariCope, and we are super thankful.
All right. And so thank you, Terry, for all of the hard work that you did in putting this together. And we have a special offer for audience members. For those of you who would have registered for this panel, one of the things we offer at CariCope is mental health coaching. And so we're offering the first 5 people who express interest to us, the first 5 men who express interest, you get 4 mental health coaching sessions with us to try it out for the first time and see if this is something that you want to use to help you elevate to the next level in life. So thank you so much for joining us. And I want to say to everyone, let's please continue to have these important conversations. Let's support one another. Let's heal, let's grow, and let's transform. And until next time, my name is Desarie Nicholas. I'm the founder of CariCope. And be well and take care. So